Okay, tonight is the 29th of July, yeah? And we come to Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 26, Arya Pariyesana Sutta. Is it loud enough? Is it loud enough? Thus have I heard. This Arya Pariyesana, the translation is the noble search. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Then when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. Then a number of monks went to the Venerable Ananda and said to him, "Friend Ananda, it is long since we had a talk on the Dhamma from the Blessed One's own lips. It would be good if we could get to hear such a talk, friend Ananda." Then let the Venerable Ones go to the Brahmin Ramaka's hermitage. Perhaps you will get to hear a talk on the Dhamma from the Blessed One's own lips. Yes, friend, they replied. We'll stop here for a moment. So this part it shows that the Buddha did not speak Dhamma very often. Maybe in the early years of his ministry, he spoke more Dhamma. Maybe towards the later years, he spoke less Dhamma because a lot of the Dhamma had already been spoken or taught by the Buddha. So actually, we are very lucky because we can get to know more suttas from the books available now than many monks during the Buddha's time. Many monks during the Buddha's time, sometimes they only get to hear the sutta when they meet the Buddha or meet a monk who's willing to teach. But here we have all about 5,000 suttas in the books, all available to us. So a Buddhist would be very silly if he did not get the Nikaya books to investigate. Then when the Blessed One had wandered for alms in Savatthi and had returned from his alms round, after his meal he addressed the Venerable Ananda. "Ananda, let us go to the eastern park, to the palace of Migara's mother, for the day's abiding." "Yes, Venerable Sir," the Venerable Ananda replied. Then the Blessed One went with the Venerable Ananda to the eastern park, the palace of Migara's mother, for the day's abiding. Then when it was evening, the Blessed One rose from meditation and addressed the Venerable Ananda. "Ananda, let us go to the eastern bathing place to bathe." "Yes, Venerable Sir," the Venerable Ananda replied. Then the Blessed One went with the Venerable Ananda to the eastern bathing place to bathe. When he was finished, he came up out of the water and stood in one robe, drying his limbs. Then the Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, the Brahmin Ramaka's hermitage is nearby. That hermitage is agreeable and delightful. Venerable Sir, it would be good if the Blessed One went there out of compassion." The Blessed One consented in silence. Stop here for a moment now. Here you see that the Venerable Ananda, he knows probably that the Buddha was going to bathe in the eastern bathing place. That's why, and the eastern bathing place is not far from the Ramaka's hermitage. Probably that was why he asked the monks to wait there. The Buddha will probably go there at night. Also, you see this Migara's mother is the name for Visakha, the lady supporter of the Buddha. She is called Migara's mother because the father-in-law's name is Migara, and because this Visakha, she brought the father-in-law into Buddhism, and the father-in-law was extremely grateful to her, so the father-in-law used to call her mother. So that's why she is known as, Visakha is known as Migara's mother. So this palace of Migara's mother, or the eastern park, is the monastery probably that Visakha donated to the Buddha. Then you see in the Vinaya books we find that when the monks during the Buddha's time, when they took a bath in the river, they would they would wear only the underrobe, what we call the sarong. And then they go into the river as the water went higher. Then they'll take off their sarong and throw it on the shore or throw it on the bush. And then they would bathe. And when after bathing, they come out naked. And then they go and retrieve their robe and put it on. So the Buddha had come out of the water and he was drying his limbs. So remember Ananda asked the Buddha to go to Ramaka's hermitage, and the Buddha agreed. Then the Blessed One went to the Brahmin Ramaka's hermitage. Now on that occasion, a number of monks were sitting together in the hermitage discussing the Dhamma. The Blessed One stood outside the door waiting for their discussion to end. When he knew that it was over, he coughed and knocked, and the monks opened the door for him. The Blessed One entered, sat down on a seat made ready, and addressed the monks thus: "Monks, for what discussion are you sitting together here now? And what was your discussion that was interrupted?" "Venerable Sir, our discussion on the Dhamma that was interrupted was about the Blessed One himself." Then the Blessed One arrived. "Good monks, it is fitting for you clansmen who have gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness to sit together to discuss the Dhamma. When you gather together, monks, you should do either one of two things. You should do either of two things. Hold discussion on the Dhamma or maintain noble silence." Let's stop here for a moment. So you see, the Buddha was very courteous. He knew that the monks were discussing Dhamma, and then he, instead of knocking on the door, he just waited for the talk to end. Then when he knew that they had finished discussion, he coughed and knocked the door, and they opened the door for him. So the Buddha said, when monks come together, they should either keep noble silence, not talk, or if they do talk, then to discuss the Dhamma. So you all, now you're all training, so you all don't talk too much and don't talk too loud. Monks, there are these two kinds of search, the noble search and the ignoble search. And what is the ignoble search? Here someone being himself subject to birth seeks what is also subject to birth. Being himself subject to aging, he seeks what is also subject to aging. Being himself subject to sickness, he seeks what is also subject to sickness. Being himself subject to death, he seeks what is also subject to death. Being himself subject to sorrow, he seeks what is also subject to sorrow. Being himself subject to defilement, he seeks what is also subject to defilement. And what may be said to be subject to birth? Wife and children are subject to birth. Men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to birth. Gold and silver means money, are subject to birth. These objects of attachment are subject to birth, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to birth, seeks what is also subject to birth. And what may be said to be subject to aging? Wife and children are subject to aging. Men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to aging. These objects of attachment are subject to aging, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to aging, seeks what is also subject to aging. And what may be said to be subject to sickness? Wife and children are subject to sickness, men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares are subject to sickness. These objects of attachment are subject to sickness, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to sickness, seeks what is also subject to sickness. And what may be said to be subject to death? Wife and children are subject to death. Men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares are subject to death. These objects of attachment are subject to death, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to death, seeks what is also subject to death, and what may be said to be subject to sorrow. Wife and children are subject to sorrow, men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares are subject to sorrow. These objects of attachment are subject to sorrow, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to sorrow, seeks what is also subject to sorrow. And what may be said to be subject to defilement, wife and children are subject to defilement, men and women slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to defilement. These objects of attachment are subject to defilement, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to defilement, seeks what is also subject to defilement. This is the ignoble search. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that a person who seeks after worldly things, the normal things that a lay person looks for, wife and children, property, money, and all this are all subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. And what is a noble search? Here someone, being himself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seeks the unborn supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Being himself subject to aging, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, he seeks the unaging supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Being himself subject to sickness, having understood the danger in what is subject to sickness, he seeks the unailing supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Being himself subject to death, having understood the danger in what is subject to death, he seeks the deathless supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Being himself subject to sorrow, having understood the danger in what is subject to sorrow, he seeks the sorrowless supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Being himself subject to defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to defilement, he seeks the undefiled supreme security from bondage, nibbana. This is the noble search. So here the Buddha says the noble or Aryan search is the search for nibbana. If a person understands the Dhamma, that all worldly things are subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, then he will let go of these things and look for a way out of all these worldly things and look for the supreme security from bondage, which is nibbana. Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too, being subject to birth, sought what was also subject to birth. Being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I sought what was also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. Then I considered thus: why, being myself subject to birth, do I seek what is also subject to birth? Why, being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, do I seek what is also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement? Suppose that, being myself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, I seek the unborn supreme security from bondage, nibbana. Suppose that, being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I seek the unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, and undefiled supreme security from bondage. Later, while still young, a black-haired young man, endowed with the blessing of youth, in the prime of life, though my mother and father wished otherwise, and wept with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. Stop here for a moment. So here you see, in the suttas, the Buddha, in the sutta here, the Buddha says very clearly, in front of his parents, even though his parents were weeping and trying to restrain him from going forth. In front of them, he shaved off his hair and beard and put on the yellow robe and left the home. Later books, they try to put it in a more romantic sort of way. I said that the Buddha, in the middle of the night, took a last look at his son and the wife and went off on his horse. But he didn't go off on his horse, he walked away. Having gone forth, monks, in search of what is wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I went to Alara Kalama and said to him, "Friend Kalama, I want to lead the holy life in this Dhamma Vinaya." Dhamma Vinaya is the teaching. Alara Kalama replied, "The Venerable One may stay here. This Dhamma is such that a wise man can soon enter upon and abide in it, realizing for himself through direct knowledge his own teacher's doctrine. I soon quickly learned that Dhamma. As far as mere lip reciting and rehearsal of his teaching went, I could speak with knowledge and assurance, and I claim I know and see, and there were others who did likewise. I considered it is not through mere faith alone that Alara Kalama declares. By realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I enter upon and abide in this Dhamma. Certainly, Alara Kalama abides knowing and seeing this Dhamma." Then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, in what way do you declare that by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge, you enter upon and abide in this Dhamma?" In reply, he declared the base of nothingness. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, soon after the Buddha went forth, he went to look for meditation teachers. So this first meditation teacher he looked for was Alara Kalama. And this Alara Kalama is a person who had attained the Arupa Jhana, the base of nothingness, which is actually a very high state of meditation. I considered not only Alara Kalama has faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. I too have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. Suppose I endeavor to realize the Dhamma that Alara Kalama declares he enters upon and abides in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge. I soon quickly entered upon and abided in that Dhamma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. Then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, is it in this way that you declare that you enter upon and abide in this Dhamma by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge?" "That is the way, friend." "It is in this way, friend, that I also enter upon and abide in this Dhamma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge." And Alara said, "It is a gain for us, friend. It is a great gain for us that we have such a Venerable One for our companion in the holy life. So the Dhamma that I declare I enter upon and abide in by realizing for myself with direct knowledge is the Dhamma that you enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge. And the Dhamma that you enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge is the Dhamma that I declare I enter upon and abide in by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. So you know the Dhamma that I know, and I know the Dhamma that you know. As I am, so are you. As you are, so am I. Come, friend, let us lead this community together." Thus, Alara Kalama, my teacher, placed me, his pupil, on an equal footing with himself and awarded me the highest honor. But it occurred to me, this Dhamma does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana, but only to reappearance in the base of nothingness. Not being satisfied with that Dhamma, I left it and went away. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha, he managed to attain this high meditation state, which his teacher had achieved, this base of nothingness, Rupa Jhana. But because the teacher was not enlightened, the teacher did not have the Buddha Dhamma, did not have the Dhamma that was necessary to attain liberation. So he only had this meditative experience only. So the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, realized that he was not going to get enlightened under this teacher, so he left the teacher. Still in search, monks, of what is wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I went to Udaka Ramaputta and said to him, "Friend, I want to lead the holy life in this Dhamma Vinaya." Udaka Ramaputta replied, "The Venerable One may stay here. This Dhamma is such that a wise man can soon enter upon and abide in it, himself realizing through direct knowledge his own teacher's doctrine. I soon quickly learned that Dhamma. As far as mere lip reciting and rehearsal of his teaching went, I could speak with knowledge and assurance, and I claimed I know and see. But there were others who did likewise. I considered it is not through mere faith alone that Rama declared, by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I enter and abide in this Dhamma. Certainly Rama abided knowing and seeing this Dhamma. Then I went to Udaka Ramaputta and asked him, "Friend, in what way did Rama declare that by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, he entered upon and abided in this Dhamma?" In reply, Udaka Ramaputta declared the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Stop here for a moment. So this second meditation teacher he went to was also a very good meditator who could attain the base of neither perception nor non-perception, which is the highest arupa jhana, very near to the state of cessation of perception and feeling already. So this was the second teacher. I considered not only Rama had faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. I too have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. Suppose I endeavor to realize the Dhamma that Rama declared he entered upon and abided in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge. Let's stop here for a moment. These 5 things are called the 5 faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness and concentration and wisdom. I soon quickly entered upon and abided in that Dhamma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. Then I went to Udaka Ramaputta and asked him, "Friend, was it in this way that Rama declared that he entered upon and abided in this Dhamma by realizing for himself with direct knowledge?" "That is the way, friend." "It is in this way, friend, that I also enter upon and abide in this Dhamma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge." And Rama said, "It is a gain for us, friend. It is a great gain for us that we have such a Venerable One for our companion in the holy life." So the Dhamma that Rama declared he entered upon and abided in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge is the Dhamma that you enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge. And the Dhamma that you enter upon and abide in by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge is the Dhamma that Rama declared he entered upon and abided in by realizing for himself with direct knowledge. So you know the Dhamma that Rama knew, and Rama knew the Dhamma that you know. As Rama was, so are you. As you are, so was Rama. Come, friend, let now lead this community. Thus Udaka Ramaputta, my companion in the holy life, placed me in the position of a teacher and accorded me the highest honor. But it occurred to me, this Dhamma does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana, but only to reappearance in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Not being satisfied with that Dhamma, I left it and went away. Let's stop here for a moment. So in the same way, the Buddha left this Rama, Udaka Ramaputta, because his teaching did not lead to liberation or enlightenment. Still in search, monks, of what is wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I wandered by stages through the Magadhan country until eventually I arrived at Senani Gama near Uruvela. There I saw an agreeable piece of ground, a delightful grove with a clear flowing river, with pleasant smooth banks, and nearby a village for alms resort. I considered, this is an agreeable piece of ground. This is a delightful grove with a clear flowing river, with pleasant smooth banks, and nearby a village for alms resort. This will serve for the striving of a clansman intent on striving. And I sat down there thinking, this will serve for striving. Let's stop here for a moment. So here actually the Buddha is talking about the last part of his struggle. After 6 years, after he left the two meditation teachers, he practiced various types of unbeneficial ascetic practices for which he suffered a lot. Eating particular types of food, going naked, fasting, eating less and less, going to all kinds of extremes. All these are mentioned, I think, in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 12. So it was after 6 years, finally he came to this place near Uruvela. Then monks, being myself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seeking the seeking the unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, I attain the unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being myself subject to aging, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, seeking the unaging supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, I attain the unaging supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being myself subject to sickness, having understood the danger in what is subject to sickness, seeking the unailing supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, I attain the unailing supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being myself subject to death, having understood the danger in what is subject to death, seeking the deathless supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, I attain the deathless supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being myself subject to sorrow, having understood the danger in what is subject to sorrow, seeking the sorrowless supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, I attain the sorrowless supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. Being myself subject to defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to defilement, seeking the undefiled supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, I attain the undefiled supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. The knowledge and vision arose in me. My deliverance is unshakable. This is my last birth. Now there is no renewal of being. So here the Buddha says he became enlightened in this place. I considered this Dhamma that I have attained is profound, hard to see and hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle to be experienced by the wise. But this generation delights in worldliness, takes delight in worldliness, rejoices in worldliness. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. And it is hard to see this truth, namely the stilling of all volitions, the relinquishing of all attachments, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, Nibbana. If I were to teach the Dhamma, others would not understand me, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. Thereupon there came to me spontaneously these stanzas never heard before, enough with teaching the Dhamma, that even I found hard to reach, for it will never be perceived by those who live in lust and hate. Those died in lust, wrapped in darkness, will never discern this abstruse Dhamma, which goes against the worldly stream, subtle, deep, and difficult to see. Considering thus, my mind inclined to inaction rather than to teaching the Dhamma. Let's stop here for a moment. So our Buddha, after he became enlightened, then he considered and he realized that most living beings, most humans, will not want to learn the Dhamma or practice the Dhamma. That's why actually most Buddhas are Pacceka Buddhas. You can see 99.99% of Buddhas are Pacceka Buddhas, because we find the Buddha said that after he became enlightened, he looked into the past and he probably stayed awake the whole night. And he looked through the past 91 world cycles and he saw only 6 Sammasambuddhas willing to teach the Dhamma to the world. Whereas in the Isigili Sutta, the Buddha says at one time there was this Isigili hill outside Rajagaha. At one time there were 500 Pacceka Buddhas staying on that hill. So you see, Pacceka Buddhas you can find a lot, but Sammasambuddhas are very, very few. So much for the Mahayana vow to become a Buddha. After they become a Buddha, they will not want to teach. Then monks, the Brahma Sahampati knew with his mind the thought in my mind, and he considered, the world will be lost, the world will perish, since the mind of the Tathagata, Arahant, Sammasambuddha, inclines to inaction rather than to teaching the Dhamma. Then just as quickly as a strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm, the Brahma Sahampati vanished in the Brahma world and reappeared before me. He arranged his upper robe on one shoulder and extending his hand, Sir, let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. Let the Sublime One teach the Dhamma. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are wasting through not hearing the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand the Dhamma. The Brahma Sahampati spoke thus, and then he said further, in Magadha there have appeared till now impure teachings devised by those still stained. Open the doors to the deathless. Let them hear the Dhamma that the stainless one has found. Just as one who stands on a mountain peak can see below the people all around, so wise one, all-seeing sage, ascend the palace of the Dhamma. Let the sorrowless one survey this human breed, engulfed in sorrow, overcome by birth and old age. Arise, victorious hero, caravan leader, deathless one, and wander in the world. Let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand. Then I listened to the Brahma's pleading, and out of compassion for beings, I surveyed the world with the eye of a Buddha. Surveying the world with the eye of a Buddha, I saw beings with little dust in their eyes, and with much dust in their eyes, with keen faculties and with dull faculties, with good qualities and with bad qualities, easy to teach and hard to teach, and some who dwelt seeing fear in blame and in the world. Just as in a pond of blue or red or white lotuses, some lotuses that are born and grow in the water thrive immersed in the water without rising out of it, and some other lotuses that are born and grow in the water rest on the water's surface, and some other lotuses that are born and grow in the water rise out of the water and stand clear, unwetted by it. So too, surveying the world with the eye of a Buddha, I saw beings with little dust in their eyes and with much dust in their eyes, with keen faculties and with dull faculties, with good qualities and with bad qualities, easy to teach and hard to teach, and some who dwelt seeing fear in blame and in the world. Then I replied to the Brahma Sahampati in stanzas, Open for them are the doors to the deathless. Let those with ears now show their faith. Thinking it would be troublesome, O Brahma, I did not speak the Dhamma, subtle and sublime. Then Brahma Sahampati thought, I have created the opportunity for the Blessed One to teach the Dhamma, and after paying homage to me, keeping me on the right, he thereupon departed at once. I'll stop here for a moment. This is Brahma Sahampati in some other sutta. I think in the Samyutta Nikaya, it is stated that he was a monk in the previous life. He was a monk in the previous life. So after becoming a Brahma, so whenever somebody becomes enlightened, he knows that he should ask the enlightened one to teach the Dhamma. Also, the other thing you can infer from these few passages is that the difference between a Pacceka Buddha and a Sammasambuddha is only that one wants to teach and the other one does not want to teach. It's not like some other later books say, that the Pacceka Buddha doesn't know how to teach, cannot teach. That's not true. You see, our Buddha would have become a Pacceka Buddha, right? It's only because of Brahma Sahampati appealing to him that he decided to teach. So all Buddhas, because they have enlightened, they know the path so well, how can they not know how to teach? They all know how to teach, only is whether they want or not. I considered thus, to whom should I first teach the Dhamma? Who will understand this Dhamma quickly? It then occurred to me, Alara Kalama is wise, intelligent and discerning. He has long had little dust in his eyes. Suppose I taught the Dhamma first to Alara Kalama. He will understand it quickly. Then deities approached me and said, Venerable Sir, Alara Kalama died 7 days ago. And the knowledge and vision arose in me. Alara Kalama died 7 days ago. I thought, Alara Kalama's loss is a great one. If he had heard this Dhamma, he would have understood it quickly. I considered thus, to whom should I first teach the Dhamma? Who will understand this Dhamma quickly? It then occurred to me, Udaka Ramaputta is wise, intelligent and discerning. He has long had little dust in his eyes. Suppose I taught the Dhamma first to Udaka Ramaputta. He will understand it quickly. Then deities approached me and said, Venerable Sir, Udaka Ramaputta died last night. And the knowledge and vision arose in me. Udaka Ramaputta died last night. I thought, Udaka Ramaputta's loss is a great one. If he had heard this Dhamma, he would have understood it quickly. I'll stop here for a moment now. So here you see, after the Buddha was enlightened, he was looking for the most, the most suitable person to teach. And he decided on his two meditation teachers. Why? Because here, as the Buddha says, they have little dust in their eyes. How come they have little dust in their eyes? Because they have attained jhana. And because they have attained jhana, they have got rid of the 5 hindrances that obstruct wisdom. So, if you teach somebody who has jhana and who has got rid of the 5 hindrances, he will understand very quickly. So, even after these two persons also, the next few persons that the Buddha taught, they also had attained jhana, either in this lifetime or the previous lifetime. That's why just upon hearing the Dhamma, many of them became arahants just by hearing the Dhamma. The other thing I want to say here is, after the Buddha knew that Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta had passed away and reborn in heaven, why didn't he go to heaven to teach them? Because it's not possible. Why? Because in some other sutta, the Buddha said that the flesh body can only fly as far as the Brahma world, the first jhana, heaven. The other heavens are too far away. This flesh body cannot reach. This rocket has got a limit. Although his mind, he may know there are some other beings there, but he cannot contact them, too far away. I learned you cannot sit like that and you listen to the Dhamma. Either put your leg at the back, I taught you, or put it like that and don't put your leg in front. So these are the two things. Remember, the most ideal person to understand the Dhamma is one who has got rid of the 5 hindrances. And the minimum you need to get rid of the 5 hindrances is threshold concentration, very close to the first jhana. Is mentioned in the Digha Nikaya. I considered thus, to whom should I first teach the Dhamma? Who will understand this Dhamma quickly? It then occurred to me, the monks of the group of 5 who attended upon me while I was engaged in my striving were very helpful. Suppose I taught the Dhamma first to them. Then I thought, where are the monks of the group of 5 now living? And with the divine eye which is purified and surpasses the human, I saw that they were living at Benares in the deer park at Isipatana. Stop here for a moment. So after that the Buddha decided to teach the 5 monks who were his disciples when he was striving to become enlightened. So since the Buddha had already attained jhanas, I'm sure he would have taught the group of 5 monks. That's why he went to teach them, because they have also got rid of the 5 hindrances. Then monks, when I had stayed at Uruvela as long as I chose, I set out to wander by stages to Benares. Between Gaya and the place of enlightenment, the Ajivaka Upaka saw me on the road and said, Friend, your faculties are clear. The color of your skin is pure and bright. Under whom have you gone forth, friend? Who is your teacher? Whose Dhamma do you profess? I replied to the Ajivaka Upaka in stanzas. I am one who has transcended all, a knower of all, unsullied among all things, renouncing all, but craving, ceasing, free. Having known this all for myself, to whom should I point as teacher? I have no teacher, and no one like me exists nowhere in all the world, with all its gods, because I have no person for my counterpart. I am the Arahant in the world. I am the teacher supreme. I alone am the Sammasambuddha, fully enlightened one, whose fires are quenched and extinguished. I go now to the city of Kasi to set in motion the wheel of Dhamma. In a world that has become blind, I go to beat the drum of the deathless. And Upaka said, by your claims, friend, you ought to be the universal victor. And the Buddha said, the victors are those like me who have won to destruction of taints or asavas. I have vanquished all evil states. Therefore, Upaka, I am a victor. When this was said, the Ajivaka Upaka said, may it be so, friend. Shaking his head, he took a bypath and departed. So you see this Ajivaka is one of the type of ascetics who go naked. So this naked ascetic, when the Buddha told him that the Buddha was enlightened, he said maybe, he shook his head. Indians like to shake their head. And then he went off. So you see, it's not easy to teach somebody, to sometimes they half believe you. In front of the Buddha, he met the Buddha, the all-knowing one. In front of the Buddha also, he just went off. Didn't want to learn under the Buddha. Then monks, wandering by stages, I eventually came to Benares, to the deer park at Isipatana, and I approached the monks of the group of 5. The monks saw me coming in the distance, and they agreed among themselves thus, friends, here comes the recluse Gotama, who lives luxuriously, who gave up his striving and reverted to luxury. We should not pay homage to him, or rise up for him, or receive his bowl and outer robe, but a seat may be prepared for him. If he likes, he may sit down. However, as I approached, those monks found themselves unable to keep their pack. One came to meet me and took my bowl and outer robe. Another prepared a seat, and another set up water for my feet. However, they addressed me by name and as friend. Stop here for a moment. These 5 disciples of the Buddha, they, together with the Buddha before enlightenment, they were striving very hard, fasting, eating very little food, to the extent of eating 1 grain of rice a day. And later, when the Buddha realized that it nearly killed him, because he fell into a stream and was so weak he could not do 1 push-up to get out of the stream. So he was drowning, and a cowgirl pulled him out of the stream and saved his life. So after that, he realized that was the wrong way. He could have died easily. So he decided to take the middle path and eat 1 meal a day. And after eating 1 meal a day, he had enough strength to sit properly and meditate and attain the jhanas. And from there, he became enlightened. So these 5 monks, because the Buddha decided to eat 1 meal a day, they thought the Buddha was too luxurious already, giving up all his ascetic practices. So they looked down on him and they left him. But during the period when they left him, the Buddha became enlightened. So now that the Buddha came back to them, they didn't realize that the Buddha was enlightened. They thought they don't want to greet the Buddha and all that. So they addressed the Buddha by name and as friend, Avuso. Thereupon I told them, monks, do not address the Tathagata by name and as friend. This Tathagata, in Chinese they translate as Ru Lai, but the proper name should be thus gone one. Thus gone one. Yes, enter Nibbana. The Tathagata is an Arahant, Sammasambuddha. Listen, monks, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you, I shall teach you the Dhamma, practicing as you are instructed. By realizing for yourselves here and now through direct knowledge, you will soon enter upon and abide in the supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. When this was said, the monks of the group of 5 answered me thus, Friend Gotama, by the conduct, the practice and the performance of austerities that you undertook, you did not achieve any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the Aryans. Since you now live luxuriously, having given up your striving, and reverted to luxury, how would you have achieved any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the Aryans? When this was said, I told them, the Tathagata does not live luxuriously, nor has he given up his striving and reverted to luxury. The Tathagata is an Arahant, Sammasambuddha. Listen, monks, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you, I shall teach you the Dhamma, etc. A second time, the monks of the group of 5 said to me, Friend Gotama, by the conduct, practice and performance of austerities that you undertook, you did not achieve any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge worthy of the noble ones, all Aryans. Since you now live luxuriously, having given up your striving and reverted to luxury, how will you have achieved any superhuman states, any distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones? A second time I told them, the Tathagata does not live luxuriously, etc. A third time the monks of the group of 5 said to me, Friend Gotama, by the conduct, the practice and the performance of austerities that you undertook, you did not achieve any superhuman states, etc. When this was said, I asked them, Monks, have you ever known me to speak like this before? And they said, No, Venerable Sir. And the Buddha said, Monks, the Tathagata is an Arahant, a Sammasambuddha. Listen, monks, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you, I shall teach you the Dhamma. Practicing as you are instructed, by realizing for yourselves here and now through direct knowledge, you will soon enter upon and abide in the supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. I was able to convince the monks of the group of 5. Then I sometimes instructed 2 monks while the other 3 went for alms. And the 6 of us lived on what those 3 monks brought back from their alms round. Sometimes I instructed 3 monks while the other 2 went for alms. And the 6 of us lived on what those 2 monks brought back from their alms round. Then the monks of the group of 5, thus taught and instructed by me, being themselves subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seeking the unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, attain the unborn supreme security from bondage, Nibbana, being themselves subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow and defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow and defilement, seeking the unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless and undefiled supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. They attain the unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless and undefiled supreme security from bondage, Nibbana. The knowledge and vision arose in them. Our deliverance is unshakable. This is our last birth. There is no renewal of being. Stop here for a moment. Here is not described, but in the Vinaya books, it is described that the Buddha taught the suttas to them one by one. The first sutta he taught was the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the turning of the Dhamma wheel. And out of the 5 monks, Kondanya understood the Dhamma there and attained stream entry. And later the Buddha taught other suttas. And finally he taught the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. When the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta was taught to these 5 monks, all of them attained arahanthood. So you see, actually the Buddha helped them to attain arahanthood by teaching them the suttas. They just listen to the suttas and attain enlightenment. Why? Because in the suttas the Buddha says there are 2 things that bring knowledge that are necessary for enlightenment: samatha and vipassana. Samatha is the practice that leads you to samadhi, and perfect samadhi, or right samadhi, or right concentration is the 4 jhanas. So the disciples probably had already attained the 4 jhanas. That's why the Buddha did not teach them meditation. The Buddha just asked them to sit down and listen. And listening to the Dhamma is vipassana. In the suttas, the meaning of vipassana is not insight, but contemplation. Contemplation, just like the Chinese translation. The Chinese translation for samatha and vipassana is Chir Kwan. Chir is stilling the mind, practicing tranquility meditation or serenity meditation. And vipassana is quan. Quan is contemplation. So the Chinese translation is correct. So this vipassana here refers to the listening to the sutta, because that's all they did. They just sat and listened to the sutta. So because in the practice of sati, there are 4 objects of sati, right? The body, feeling, mind, and Dhamma. Dhamma refers to the Buddha's Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. And out of these 4 objects, the most important is Dhamma, because it is mentioned that there are 5 occasions for enlightenment, and 4 of them have to do with contemplating the Dhamma. So here, there's a meaning of vipassana here, listening to the Dhamma and becoming enlightened. Monks, there are these 5 causes of sensual pleasure. What are the 5? Forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of lust. Sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles. These are the 5 causes of sensual desire. So the forms, sounds, odors, flavors, and tangibles. As to those recluses and Brahmins who are tied to these 5 causes of sensual pleasure, infatuated with them and utterly committed to them, who use them without seeing the danger in them or understanding the escape from them, it may be understood of them. They have met with calamity, met with disaster. The evil one may do with them as he likes. Suppose a forest deer who was bound lay down on a heap of snares. It might be understood of him. He has met with calamity, met with disaster. The hunter can do with him as he likes. And when the hunter comes, he cannot go where he wants. So too, as to those recluses and Brahmins who are tied to these 5 causes of sensual desire, of sensual pleasure, it may be understood of them. They have met with calamity, met with disaster. The evil one may do with them as he likes. Let's stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha is saying that those recluses or monks or ascetics who are attached to the 5 causes of sensual pleasure, forms, sounds, smells, taste, and touch, then they are already caught by Mara, the evil one, just like the deer was caught by these snares, bound by the snare. He cannot go anywhere. Anytime the hunter can come and catch him. As to those recluses and Brahmins who are not tied to these 5 causes of sensual pleasure, who are not infatuated with them or utterly committed to them, and who use them seeing the danger in them and understanding the escape from them, it may be understood of them. They have not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The evil one cannot do with them as he likes. Suppose a forest deer who was unbound lay down on a heap of snares. It might be understood of him. He has not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The hunter cannot do with him as he likes. And when the hunter comes, he can go where he wants. So too, as to those recluses and Brahmins who are not tied to these 5 causes of sensual pleasure, it may be understood of them. They have not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The evil one cannot do with them as he likes. Suppose a forest deer is wandering in the forest wilds. He walks without fear, stands without fear, sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the hunter's range. So too, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one, by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that those recluses and Brahmins, that means those monks and ascetics, if they are not attached to the 5 causes of sensual pleasure, then they use the 5 causes of sensual pleasure, but they don't crave for them, so they are not caught by Mara. And then, just like a forest deer in the wilds, he's not afraid of the hunter, because in the deep woods there's no hunter around. So he can walk without fear, sit without fear, etc. In the same way, the Buddha says, if a monk has attained the first jhana, then he is out of the range of Mara, blindfolded Mara, become invisible to the evil one. Why is that so? Because when a monk has attained the first jhana or any of the other jhanas, he experiences a bliss which surpasses worldly pleasures, sensual pleasures. So because he has attained a pleasure which surpasses sensual pleasures, he's no more attached to sensual pleasures. He knows of a happiness which is higher than worldly happiness. So because he's no more attached to these five cords of sensual pleasure, Mara cannot catch him anymore. Mara can only catch us through the sights, beautiful sights, sounds, smells and tastes. That's why a lot of monks who succumb to these sensual pleasures and break their precepts and disrobe, you always find they are the monks who have not attained jhana, who do not practice samatha. So like nowadays, you find many monks practicing vipassana. So some of them, because they don't have the strength of mind, they succumb to this weakness caught by Mara, and they disrobe. Again, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one, by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. Similarly, a monk enters upon and abides in the third jhana, fourth jhana, and also he has blindfolded Mara to have become invisible to the evil one. Again, with the complete surmounting of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, aware that space is infinite, a monk enters upon and abides in the base of infinite space. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one. Similarly, a monk enters upon and abides in the base of infinite consciousness, in the base of nothingness, in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. That monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one, by depriving Mara's eye of his opportunity. Again, by completely surmounting the base of neither perception nor non-perception, a monk enters upon and abides in the cessation of perception and feeling, and his stains or asavas are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one, by depriving Mara's eye of his opportunity, and to have crossed beyond attachment to the world. He walks without fear, stands without fear, sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the range of the evil one's range. Because he is out of the evil one's range. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So you see, in suttas like this, the Buddha always stressed the attainment of the jhanas. And it's very clear here that the way not to be, to escape Mara, the evil one, is to attain the jhanas. Even the very first jhana, among, according to this sutta, even when you have attained the first jhana, Mara is not able to catch you already, because you have let go of your attachment to the baits that Mara. The Mara can only catch us with this baited hook. It's beautiful sights, sounds, smells, taste, and touch. It's already about an hour. So I don't think I have time to do another sutta. You can have a short discussion if you want. Let me just recap. So here, this sutta, the Buddha is saying that there is this ignoble search and the noble search. This is quite a long sutta. And the way of worldlings, normal, ordinary person in the world, is to engage in this ignoble search, to chase after the things in the world that are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, worldly things like family, property, money. And then when a person understands the Dhamma, then he understands worldly things will bring you suffering, will bring you sorrow, lamentation, grief and despair. So a person who understands the Dhamma, he lets go of the worldly things, and he seeks the supreme security from bondage, liberation. So the Buddha described how he also went along this path. He left the family, though his parents cried and wept in front of them. He wore the robe, shaved off his hair, and left the home. And then he went from teacher to teacher. First he went to some meditation teachers, and after attaining great meditation states, he found that it did not lead to liberation, so he left, and then he followed other ascetics who practice different types of unbeneficial ascetic practices. This he did for 6 years until later he nearly died. Then when he considered, then he realized the way to Nibbana is through meditation. So he went back to meditating, attaining the jhanas. And then after attaining the 4 jhanas, he contemplated the past lives. And when he looked into the past lives, he saw that he was a monk before. So when he saw that lifetime under the previous Buddha Kassapa, then all the Dhamma that he learned came back to him. Without Dhamma, a person cannot become enlightened. So when he remembered all the Dhamma, the 4 noble truths and all that, so on the night of enlightenment, there were 3 knowledges the Buddha attained. The first one was the heavenly eye, where he saw beings. The first one was recollecting the past lives. He recollected his many past lives until he realized he was a monk before. Then the second one was he used the heavenly eye, the divine eye, to see beings dying and passing away, dying and taking rebirth, dying and taking rebirth according to karma. Then understood how karma affects every living being. We are reborn according to our karma, karma vipaka. Then the third watch of the night, from 2 to 6 a.m., he used the Dhamma that he remembered, especially the 4 noble truths, contemplated the 4 noble truths, understood clearly the 4 noble truths, and became enlightened. So it's the way the Buddha attained enlightenment. So after that, the Buddha described how he wanted to teach his 2 meditation teachers, but they had passed away, and he reborn in 2 higher heavens so that he could not go and teach them. So he taught the 5 disciples, and they also became enlightened. And this last part, the Buddha says that the only way to escape from Mara is to attain the jhanas. When we attain the jhanas, then we get out of the range of Mara. Mara cannot catch us anymore. Okay, stop here.
Namo Buddhaya, Bhante. Bhante would like to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
It's mentioned that the Buddha went to study under 2 teachers, Alara Kalama and Dhammaputra. Both are external sect teachers, Bhante.
Yes.
And assuming that the Buddha was at least Sotapan in his previous life, he would have attained right view already, and yet he had to study under external sect teachers because there were no Sammasambuddha at that time. So Bhante, can Bhante clarify for us how he had to learn meditation under those 2 teachers?
Yes, because if a person becomes a Sotapanna or Sakadagamin, first or second fruit Arya, when he comes back as a human being, he would have forgotten his previous life. So because of that, all the Dhamma that he knew, he does not remember. It's below his threshold, conscious, normal waking consciousness. It is deep inside him. So he has to meditate and attain the jhanas like the Buddha did, and then recall the past lives. When he recalled his past lives, then only he remembered the Dhamma that he learned. So because the Buddha did not remember before enlightenment, did not remember his past lives, so the only thing that was guiding him was this great desire to become enlightened. So he went from teacher to teacher, even learning and practicing. I noticed during the Buddha's struggle to become enlightened, he practiced a lot of unbeneficial ascetic practices, which later he said was useless. So just because he did not remember, that's why he practiced all that. Also, it's mentioned in the suttas that an Arya even though Arya is said to have perfect moral conduct, it does not mean that an Arya cannot break the precepts. It is stated even Arya can break the minor precepts. Only thing is he does not hide. He does not hide the fact that he has broken precepts or done something wrong. He will tell his companions in the holy life. So I think a person who in a past life is an Arya, when he comes back now, he also can break some minor precepts. Not that he cannot break the minor precepts. It's only that serious precepts he would not break, like kill a person or commit adultery.
Next question is something, when a person in jhana, when they attain, is temporarily suspend the hindrances, the 5 hindrances. What about the factors, Bhante, the 10 factors? Because the 10 factors also, some of them are the 5 hindrances also.
Okay, so are you talking about Arya or not Arya?
Say they are not Arya, they can attain the jhana. So I was thinking their hindrances would have been reduced when they attain the jhana. So, but if they do not have right view, so what happens when they are out of the jhana, they still have the hindrances?
Okay, according to the suttas, when a person attains the jhanas, he eliminates the 5 hindrances. Eliminates the 5 hindrances, not just temporary, but cut them off. So when he comes out of jhana, it is still the 5 hindrances are still cut. But if that person is not an Arya, that means he has not destroyed the 3 lower factors, like identity view, attachment to rules and rituals, and doubt. These 3 things have nothing to do with the 5 hindrances. And then another 2 is sensual desire and ill will. This sensual and desire and ill will, for example, an external ascetic who has attained jhana, he would have eliminated these 2. He would have eliminated these 2 because in the suttas the Buddha says, an external ascetic, if he has attained the jhanas and you slander him, your karma also is very heavy, because for the simple reason that he has attained the jhanas. Because the jhanas are states called Uttari Manusa Dhamma, super normal states, superhuman states. They are not easy to achieve. So somebody like Jesus Christ, who has attained the jhanas, in my mind, even though he is not an Arya, you can consider him a holy man in that respect, that he has attained the jhanas, just like some Hindu yogis, they have attained psychic power. To that extent, they are holy, that they have attained these supernormal attainments. because they have not only cut off sensual desire and generally ill will, but the mind is very clear. The Buddha says somebody who has got rid of the five hindrances, he sees things clearly. That's why somebody like Jesus Christ, you look at the things that he says, words of wisdom.
He mentioned the Zhen Quan encompass both samatha and vipassana. How about the Japanese Zen meditation? Does it encompass both?
The Zen meditation, there are a few types, but the common one is like Kong An, they call it. They ask this question, who am I? Or who is reciting the Buddha's name? So they depends on the way they practice. So if they also have this Chirkwan, this Chirkwan is one of their meditations.
A nice eye-opening talk yet again. Is it true that you cannot enlighten in the heavenly planes? You have to be of the flesh to be able to enlighten, like to become liberated.
There is a sutta where it is stated that the arahants are only found here, that means in the human plane. Person becomes an arahant only on the human plane. That contradicts the later books who said we are like the Abhidhamma books. They say that the Buddha taught the Abhidhamma in heaven, and 800 million devas became enlightened, became arahants in heaven. This contradicts the suttas. However, heavenly beings, because life is so pleasurable in heaven, there are no renunciants. You don't have monks and nuns in heaven, and the only thing, the only extent they want to go on the spiritual path is to listen to the Dhamma. Wherever the Dhamma is taught, devas and devis are very happy to come and listen to the Dhamma. And by listening to the Dhamma, devas and devis can attain stream entry. So human beings, Aryans, when we are reborn in heaven, we don't strive because heaven is so pleasurable. There's no incentive to strive. We don't see any dukkha in heaven. So we come back to the human world to strive. The other thing is, Sotapanna and Sakadagamins, they come back to the human world to strive. And then Anagamin, they have practically finished their work. Anagamins are born in the fourth jhana plane, called the Sudavasa abode, pure abodes. And from there are supposed to be five heavens, 5 levels there. And some of them are born in the first level. After they pass away, they are reborn in the second level, third level, fourth level, fifth level, the highest level. After the 5th level, they just enter Nibbana, because they have practically done their work. So the simile given in the sutta is like a blacksmith. He heats some metal up to red hot, and he's hammering on the metal, maybe to make a sword or a hammer, whatever tool. So he's banging on the heated iron, and the chip flies off. This chip flies off, falls to the ground. The different stages. This chip, red hot chip, flies off, and it cools very fast. By the time it reaches the ground, it's already cool. There's another type. It flies off, and when it hits the ground, it has not cooled yet, but in a short while it will become cool. Then another one falls to the ground, and then it starts a small fire before it cools down. So This cooling down is attaining Nibbana. This simile, this simile means that the Anagamins, the third fruit Arya, they are born in the pure abodes, and from there they cool down into Nibbana. They enter Nibbana. So they don't actually attain Arahanthood. They just enter Nibbana. It's only humans attain Arahanthood.
Factors for Sotapan. I'd like to ask about Sila Bhatta Paramasa as rules and rituals. Say, for example, if a person were to be, some people they're very, very set in doing things, so set that it can become ritual. They set their own rules so that it is so fixed that others will find it difficult to work with them, so much so that it affects relationship. So I was wondering whether, for example, like temples, different temples have different way of perhaps serving the monk and whatsoever. And let's say some temple they can be some people working in the temple can be very fixed in their ways, that either you follow or you're not welcome at all. So is this Sila Bhatta Paramasa, Bhante?
It's a bit hard to say whether it's Sila Bhatta Paramasa, but Sila Bhatta Paramasa means attachment to Sila and Bhatta or Vata. Sila are rules, are precepts, and Vata are religious observances. So they have a purpose. So different traditions practice different things. But if a person is so attached to this Sila and this Vata, and they make a show of it, and then that is attachment to Sila and Vata, make a show of it. Because in the monk's Vinaya, a monk is not allowed to show off, even in the sense that if a monk likes to live alone or live in seclusion, he is not allowed to tell everybody, I like to live alone, I like to live in seclusion, because that is showing off. So in the same way, the precepts are meant to help us to practice. We keep the precepts and we keep this Vata, practice this Vata and all that, to help us attain liberation, so that we don't do anything wrong for which we can have remorse. If you don't have good Sila, then you might do something unskillful, and later you regret it. And when you have regret, your mind is troubled, your mind is not happy, it cannot calm down. To attain samadhi, concentration, a prerequisite is a happy mind. And happy mind means one of the conditions is keeping a good Sila. But unfortunately, some monks, they like to make a show that they have extremely good Sila. In the monks' Vinaya, two things don't need lay people to offer. One is water. If a monk needs to drink water, even no lay person around, never mind, you just help yourself to water, because it's a necessity. Another one is I think toothpick or something like that. So I remember many years ago that a foreign monk came into Penang. Happened to be in the monastery, and he was telling lay people that water also has to be offered, because the water is boiled, it uses electricity, and electricity means using money and all these things. So to me, I think that was a bit of a show-off. I forgot to tell lay people that he's not allowed to accept money, but he was accepting money, but he was telling that this water has to be offered. So that is what is meant by Silabhata Paramasa. Only thing is, of course, there are some monks, they are very strict with the rules. Not so much that they have Silabhata Paramasa. It's just that there are some monks, especially new monks, because when I was a new monk, I was also extremely fussy about the precepts. And usually that is because a new monk cannot differentiate properly between what is important and what is not important. So a new monk would think everything is important. So he is afraid of doing anything wrong. So to him everything is important. So that is excusable. And it's also good for a new monk to be very strict, because you know human habits. As we grow older, we tend to be more and more relaxed. You can even say the same for the Buddha, because in the Buddha's younger days, you look in the Vinaya books, he was very strict and very fussy. Even some of the monks, I think they wanted to use some clay scrubber to scrub their feet. Also, the Buddha said not allowed. But later, when the Buddha was about to enter Nibbana, it is in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, they offered him a cloth, I think with gold embroidered or something. Actually, he doesn't need it, but out of compassion for the lay person, he accepted it. Probably in his younger days, he would have refused. So it is human characteristic that over the years we tend to become more relaxed. So in the beginning of a monk's career, it is very good to be very strict.
Lay people, when it comes to Silabhata Paramasa, if you follow the proper teaching, you don't have much rights and rituals to follow.
There's not much for lay people.